to the show, everyone. Today's guest is Mark Silverman. At 27 years old, Mark was an alcoholic and a drug addict, homeless and living out of his truck, weighing only 135 pounds. In 1989, his brother offered him a place to live as long as he got sober. So Mark entered AA and went to college. His first job after college was in sales, and while Mark was painfully shy and initially couldn't bear to pick up the phone and interrupt someone's day, he soon figured out he had a natural ability to connect with other people and relate to them. Soon, Mark was at the top of the sales charts and living in a multi-million-dollar home. Still, his imposter syndrome had him stressing out about every detail and thing outside of his control. He was so driven and always on, leading to burnout and severe anxiety. His marriage, his family life, and his health all suffered. Something had to give. Mark decided on a whim to confront his health challenges and do something big. He hired a coach to train him to run a marathon, and he exceeded all expectations and learned that with the help of a guide, he could accomplish great things. Mark's success continued in his career in technology sales, where he generated over $90 million for fast-growing startups by bringing together executives, tech leaders, and stakeholders to close complex multi-million-dollar sales. He's now a best-selling author, a coach, a speaker, and host of the Rising Leader podcast, turning high achievers into effective leaders. He's on a mission to share the lessons he's learned along the way and help others define and achieve their own success. I'm excited to have Mark on the show today to share his story of overcoming adversity, anxiety, and overwhelm to succeed on his terms and coach others to do the same. And with that, Mark Silverman, welcome to the show.
Thank you. That was not my written introduction. You did your homework.
I did a little homework. You have a fabulous story, my friend. I appreciate you coming on the show and being willing to share it. And I'm excited to chop it up with you.
Appreciate it.
Right on. Let's go to the beginning, man. Let's talk about childhood. How does someone end up in the place that you were? You end up in a pretty dark spot, 135 pounds, light, skinny. I'm picturing not a healthy man as an alcoholic and drug addict living in your truck. So tell me about that story. What was childhood like for you?
Childhood was, normal by most people's standards. But in the background, some rough things were going on. I had severe asthma as a kid, so I was sickly. So I was kind of a runt and kind of sickly, and just kind of the kind of kid that wouldn't thrive socially and in the Lord of the Rings neighborhood that I grew up in.
Yeah.
What I learned later in my 40s that I have severe ADD, I think that has a lot to do with the addiction. Right. So when I went off to college, my parents both my parents didn't graduate high school. So college was kind of a foreign thing for us. When I went off to college, I couldn't sustain it. I went to a bar one night and they gave me a job in the coat check because the coat check person walked out, and I made $100 that night. I never went back to college.
Really?
That was fun.
Yeah.
And I made money. So that started my career of bartending and partying for a living, which didn't lead any place good.
It's interesting because I've had a few guests on. Austin Linney comes to mind, and a few others where being a server or bartender was this like drug in itself, like the energy that you get from it. And I mean, a lot of people do, right? When you're in college, I worked in bars. I was a bartender, I was a waiter. And I remember it's a adrenalizing type job, right? Very high intensity, go from everything's dead to the restaurant's packed and everybody's freaking out and busyness and chaos and yet money.
Perfect for someone with ADD.
Right. Right. A lot of
I
that.
thrived. The busier it was, the better I was at it. Right.
Yeah.
That was great. But it was the change came when, my whole family was in the restaurant business. My brother owned some of the most famous restaurants in Washington, D.C. That's why I came to D.C. to borrow money from him. And I told him, I said, look, I'm going to go into restaurant management. I was working at the Four Seasons Hotel, and I said, I'm going to go into management. And he walked. I remember the day. It was after a blizzard, and he walked me around Georgetown for an hour, freezing my ass off, and said, all right, if you're going to be in the restaurant business, you're going to do it right. You're going to culinary school, then you're going to business school. And by the time he was done, he talked me out of it. right? And
You're like, that doesn't sound like any fun, right?
yeah, I'm like that's not. I thought I was just going to fall into this.
Yeah.
So that was the shift in my thinking, that maybe I could be the person in my family not to be in the restaurant business. So that was different. And then at the Four Seasons, I talked them into giving me a professional job in the front office, which was foreign to me. I didn't even know what a fax machine was. This was in the
Pre-internet.
late '80s, early '90s, right? And learning that, but that was the shift that gave me something. So I met my wife in the meetings, and when we decided to get married, I told her, I said, look, I may never be anything more than a waiter. You need to understand. She came from a well-to-do family,
Yeah.
and her family was so good to me. Even though I was a waiter and they were college educated, and they were just good to me. And she said, "No, I trust you." So when I got my first sales job, that was terrifying to me, because again, like you said in the introduction, I'm shy. I don't like to bother people. I was voted best bartender in New Haven, Connecticut, when I was drinking and doing cocaine, and then got fired the second I quit drinking. Right, so I'm not fun when I'm not drinking. So with the sales, it wasn't until I was about to get fired from my first sales job, and it wasn't until I realized that connecting with people and using that superpower that I seem to have was a key to sales. And I went from last place to first place in that sales job, right? So I went from never ever in my life making more than $26,000 a year to making $50,000 a year. Then got a new sales job and made $100,000 a year. And I thought, wow, that to me was
Right.
mind blowing, because again, whiplash, homeless guy making money.
How did you end up homeless? How did you end up in that spot?
Burning a lot of bridges, creating a lot of debt, losing a lot of jobs, and then getting thrown out of a group house that I was living in for the last time. And I no longer, because I kept getting thrown out of where I was living, and I would go get a motel and I'd put it on a credit card, and I'd get a PO box whatever city I was in. I was pretty resourceful. Then I get a waiter job, and I would start over, and then it just invariably kept happening that way. Finally, I was out of credit card, credit, and I was just out, and I was looking at homeless shelters, and I hadn't talked to my family in 4 or 5 years. And I finally called I called my brother here in DC, and I said, look, I need to borrow money. And there was no such thing as Venmo back then.
Yeah.
You had to go to a Western Union, and what we didn't know is you had to go to the exact Western Union where they were wiring the money. So he's like, why don't you, you're driving all around the country, living in your truck. Why don't you drive to Washington, DC?
Yeah.
And I had a Unicall 76 card that still had some room on it. I just, thank God for Unicall 76. So I ate chocolate chip cookies and Diet Cokes and went from Unicall 76 station to Unicall 76 station to get to Washington, D.C. And that's when I ended up here. That picture that I have of me 3 weeks after I was here, I have body dysmorphia, so I thought I was fat. Oh my God, I was so skinny.
Yeah.
Because I hadn't eaten.
Yeah. And so this is at 27. So this is before wife, before kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
None of that was even a thought. My children have never seen me or my ex-wife drink.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. And so, man, and so now you're in DC, and you start to kind of pursue this culinary that you get on with the Four Seasons. That's like high end. I mean, that's as high end as you can really get in the hoteling space.
Yeah, it was amazing, and I was on the fast track. The vice president of the Four Seasons took me under his wing and became my mentor, and I became night manager of the Four Seasons, and wearing a suit and running the hotel at night. And again, $26,000 a year,
right.
Nights, weekends, every holiday that you can work, so it looked like that was my destiny, and it was very glamorous, because I was greeting kings and queens and royalty and movie stars, and the mistake you think is you're part of that. Yes. When you're in that kind of glamorous situation. But I took an aptitude test, and I got married, and we were going to have a kid, and I was like, what am I going to do to support my family? So I took an aptitude test, and it said I should either be a writer, a lawyer, or a salesperson. And I was never going to be a lawyer because I wasn't ever going to go to school that long. I wasn't going to be a writer because I write like an eighth grader. And if you read my books, they're not literary giants. They sell a lot and they do some good, but
Right.
turn of phrase isn't my thing. Grammar actually isn't my thing. And then I took a sales job, and that was the start of something, and that was the start of me actually exceeding any understanding of my own limitations. Like it was, every success was like, what? Like who is this guy buying $1 million house? Who is this guy, right, driving a Lexus sports car? Like what? And for me, that inside, I was constantly, I just got off stage in Nashville, and I was talking about how I was at the Four Seasons Hotel in Maui at a club trip from a sales job. I was in the running for Rookie of the Year. I was one of a few sales guys who was brought to Hawaii to hang out with the president and the CEO and the executive leadership team. And I'm walking around the Four Seasons, and what they don't know is that just a few years before that, I was waiting on these people.
Mm.
Just a few years before that, I was homeless, and none of these people knew that story. Right. And the insides, like for me to walk out of my hotel room to face these shiny people that, I didn't know what their backgrounds were. That was a hard thing. And that led to my second crash and burn.
Right. So were you completely clean and sober at this point? Or were you
completely clean and sober?
When you quit, did you quit successfully? Like I'm done?
Never had another drink, never had another drug.
Wow.
Yeah, so my brother was, in AA. All his friends were in AA. It was in Georgetown. They were the glamorous AA people at the time. And in the late '80s, early '90s, AA was kind of cool. So I was in the middle of all these incredible people who I went to the gym with, and we had Thursday night dinners and went to a men's group. And it was, I was in the pocket of people who were holding me. Yeah. I'm very grateful. None of the, my brother died last year. And my new book, The Rising Leader Handbook, is dedicated to him. It basically the dedication is just, none of this happens if you didn't exist.
Wow. Is he your older brother?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was 7 years older.
Wow, man. I'm sorry for your loss. That's tragic to hear that. So you've got this imposter syndrome built up around this whole idea that you were someone very different just a few years before, right? But you're excelling. You're on this club trip. You've been invited to Maui, and yet you're having a hard time coming out and facing these folks because you've got this imposter syndrome saying, "Who are you to be here?" Right? It's kind of. I
would say it was more than imposter syndrome. It was more of an imposter identity, right? Imposter syndrome is like you've gone to college, you've done these things, and maybe they'll find out I'm a fraud. I was the homeless guy. Like for me, it was just so clear that I was playing dress up, and somebody was going to figure out, what a loser I was. It was, that was years underneath, pedaling as fast as I could, making sure my t-shirts were white. Like I recycled. I was such a good boy. Like my ex-wife used to say, Mark, you're a 10 as a husband, you were a 10 as a father, you were a 10 as a worker, you were a 10 as a son. You were just you were all things to all people all the time. And that was to make up for, what crap I felt like inside.
So you were putting just tremendous energy and brain power in order to be at that 10 level. And it was just grinding you up.
If someone criticized me, I crumbled because there was a chink in the armor. Like how could anybody see? Like I put up such a facade of got it together and perfect that I hated if anybody ever saw behind that.
Yeah. How hard was it to perform at sales? Because you talk about being shy, but then overcoming I connect with people.
Terror every day.
Yeah.
Terror every single day. I remember I was asked to speak about, when I became really, really successful. I was more successful than a lot of my contemporaries and my friends. And I was asked to speak on how to get rich and how to make money. And all I said to them was, look, this is all I know is, the whole adage, show up prepared and show up prepared on time. But I'm terrified every single day, terrified every single day. And I get up and get out of bed and show up anyway. I've done presentations in front of groups of people with sweating because I'm terrified. And I made the sale, right?
Mm.
Like but I was able to walk through those fears because I felt like I didn't have anything behind, like my family depended on me. I had
Mm.
two kids and a wife, and like I just couldn't fail at this.
So that was the motivator, was the family, you feel like? Was it
It was everything. The
more than the
family,
money, more than the money or the
the
success or
money
the
never meant the money never meant anything to me. I did buy, like I would buy Hugo Boss suits and $125 silk ties and all that, and a gold watch and all that, but to kind of cover up the homeless guy,
mm.
not because I needed those things. Um, now I have a problem with buying things because I like nice things, but back then, it was all to cover it up. And I had a very frugal wife at the time, so that was really helpful in putting our money in smart places. But yeah, I lost the train. You got me going. You got me going back in time here.
Yeah, that's all right. So, all right. So, at what point does this overwhelm and anxiety and fear and terror and all that start to overcome you, where it's getting more difficult to function, or you feel like, I know you talked about, or I think maybe in some of my research, you were having panic attacks. You have to go back into your hotel room and.
About 2007, 2008, the cracks started happening. My ex-wife remembers I got chewed out by one of my bosses who was my mentor. And she said that's when it started.
What did he chew you out for?
It was a female, and so I was the number one sales rep for like 8 years in a row. And she accused. It was Christmas Day, and I was in Florida with my family, and she accused me of stealing from the company. My wife said that she said she saw all the color drain out of my face, and she said you were never the same again. But she accused me of stealing from the company, and all these other things. And I'm like,
falsifying
you know
sales
me.
records or
I'm
something?
like,
Like what?
I'm sorry.
Falsifying sales records, or how would she? What was the? How would you steal?
No, fudging pricing
Mm,
on not stealing, like putting money in my pocket, but kind of stealing from my customers to make sure I made the sale.
mm,
And finally I said to her, I said, I've been success. She says, you're lucky. The only reason you've been successful at this company is because you're lucky. I said, I have made club 8 years in a row. How is that luck? And she said, oh no, it was just the territory that was handed to you. And like it was horrible.
mm.
And that was the start. I wound up actually finishing out that year being her number one salesperson, which she had to hug me on stage, which was kind of sweet victory. But I wound up taking I called the president of the company who I was friends with and I'm friends with to this day, and I said, I'm burnt out. I can't do this anymore. And they gave me 4 months off. They were so kind to me. They gave me 4 months off with benefits and all that stuff and guaranteed me a job coming back. But all my accounts were going to be taken away. And that's when I started kind of getting in touch with the cracks. And I wound up coming back, and it didn't work. And I got another job, and then when I got the next job again, I was always at the fastest growing company in Silicon Valley history. Each company I went to, we put on our slide because it was the next. My resume is flawless when it comes to tech companies.
So that's where you were doing all these. The sales work was technology
Right.
sales in
It was
Silicon
all
Valley.
technology sales,
Yeah.
but I was at this company, and it was really cachet company. And then I started having panic attacks at my desk, and I would have to get up, and I have to walk around. I would walk around the campus of the office building over and over and over until I could calm myself down. My marriage started to fall apart. I couldn't sell anything. I would go to meetings. I would go to a meeting like with 35, 40 people. And then 15 minutes in the meeting, I'd start breaking out in hives.
Mm.
And I'd have to run out of the meeting before my face got distorted from these hives. It was horrible what was happening. Stone cold sober, my body was completely betraying me. My psyche was completely betraying me. And I know now in hindsight that was all the trauma, all the childhood trauma, all the faking it for all those years, all the just running on 10, like with the gas pedal down all those years trying to outrun the homeless guy, just destroyed everything. My health, my career, my marriage, and I found out myself living in an apartment around the corner from my ex-wife and kids.
So you separated from your wife?
We separated, and yeah, it was terrible. It was just, and it was stone cold sober, to the point where I would walk around my apartment in front of the window, praying for a bullet to come through the window and kill me, because I couldn't kill myself because I knew I wouldn't leave that legacy for my kids. That was the only reason I wouldn't kill myself, because the depression and the self-hatred was so deep. And I would get up at 2:00 in the morning and just walk around my town for an hour, 2 hours, just until I could, exhaust myself to go back home. It was terrible.
Man. Pardon the interruption, everyone. Do you ever feel like you're out of alignment with your true gifts, your passion, and your purpose for being on this earth? Do you feel like you're grinding it out each week with the appearance of success and still asking, is this it? If so, I get it. I've been right where you're at. And once I figured it out for myself, it's why I started coaching. Now I help my clients get back into alignment with their authentic self. I help them find meaning, purpose, joy, and energy in each day. Check out my website at ericsardina.com to learn more and to schedule a free 15-minute strategy session. And now, back to the show. And so now you're in this apartment and you're going through this, and I know we talk about like your health, like you were near death. So tell me about the health situation. Was it your blood pressure through the roof? What was going on?
They didn't know what was wrong. I was having, the hives and the panic attacks and the fevers. They didn't, I kept getting misdiagnosed. I kept going to doctor after doctor. And I thought, I was pretty sure I was going to die. Like I was getting weaker and weaker and weaker and sicker and sicker and sicker. And I just was like, whatever's happened to me, I'm not going to make it. I resigned myself to that. And that's when I decided, look, if I'm going to die, I made the 3 commitments to myself in 2009. I'm going to run the Marine Corps Marathon because I heard this guy talking on the radio who said everybody can run. I couldn't run a mile, but I was going to run them. I was going to show my kids what you do when everything falls apart. I was going to make $1 million to leave to my ex-wife and kids. And I was going to give $60,000 to charity, because that's what I figured all my medical bills would have added up to if I didn't have health insurance and I didn't feel worthy of the fact that I had health insurance. So I wanted to give money to charity for someone else who couldn't afford what I had. That year, I ran the Marine Corps Marathon.
What year was the Marine Corps Marathon that you ran?
Yeah, I ran the Marine Corps Marathon.
What year?
2009.
Okay. I ran it in 2012, so I was curious because I knew it sounded like the time frames were lining up there, and it's pretty close together.
I'm a lot older than you, so yeah. It's
I don't know, man. You don't look older than me. You look good.
I'm going to be 62.
No way, dude. Yeah, you're a few years older than me. Yeah, I'm 50. I'll be 56. Yeah, right on.
I was 48 when I ran the marathon, and
nice.
I made the $1 million. I had gotten a new job that January, and they gave me my dream engineer, who when I knew him years ago was also drinking, and he got sober. And he says, I just want you to know I don't drink. I'm like, oh fuck, thank God.
Yeah.
And it was awesome. And he and I crushed it that year. And so my career was back on track. I wrote the check for $60,000. My family was doing better. And here was the secret. Here's the secret to what changed. While I was running and training, I was listening to Brian Johnson's Philosopher's Notes, and what he does is he does these summaries of all the greatest books ever written: spiritual books, self-help books, positive psychology books, business books. And I was listening to those, and if I liked the book, I would buy that on audio, and I would listen to that book, and I was meditating, and I was journaling, and I was just feeding myself all this stuff, so that when the year ended, my ex-wife said to me, she goes, I was so worried about you. She said, you were depressed and suicidal. And she said, and what I realized is you did everything that the books say to do when you're depressed and suicidal. She says, I'm so impressed with what you did for yourself and what you did for your kids and what you did for me. You never not didn't show up for us. I never lived more than walking distance from my kids. And but that putting Mark back together differently, creating an absolutely new human being was essential for me to do the next chapters in my life. And that's how I became who I am today, right? Having everything broken down. And Pema Trojan says, when tragedy strikes, you have two choices. You can harden and close or soften and open. And I read that at the exact right time. And I made the conscious decision that if I live, if by the grace of God, I'm okay, that I am going to dedicate my life to sharing what I've learned with other people. And what I learned was I am loved, I am worthwhile without any accomplishments, without any, I am just worthy of love. And for me, that, at 50 years old, that was a complete revelation that I'm not a shit. I'm actually loved and worthy of love was a complete and utter revelation to me. And I was like an ex-smoker. Like I needed everybody to know that they're okay. And that's my life's mission.
That's awesome. So there's a spiritual, a faith component that comes in there?
There's a rabid and deep spiritual faith-based component.
Do you want to share any of that? Because I'd love for you to, if you'd like to.
Yeah, it's not denominational in any way. I've just spent a lot of time with God, and I know the Bible, the Gospels. I've read the Quran. I've read the Bhagavad Gita. I've steeped myself in Michael Singer and like in every. I've just was such a seeker of understanding and knowledge and of healing that I did. My sons are pretty observant Jews. We raised them in an Orthodox Judaism, and one of my sons is actually graduating. He's a rabbi. So it's I say I'm guaranteed a place in heaven because I spawned a rabbi.
You got all your bases covered, right?
It's pretty cool. But for me, yeah, without God, whatever you decide to call him, her, it, and that connection to something deeper than whatever my personality of Mark J. Silverman is, that's what I run on. That's what fuels me today, not the ex-homeless guy, not the person trying to prove something, not even the leadership coach, right? It's whatever's working through me.
Right on. Gotcha. Talk a little bit about, just because I'm a runner as well, love to run, love endurance running. Any kind of takeaways from the Marine Corps Marathon?
Don't go from 0 to running the Marine Corps Marathon in 8 months, because I have a new Achilles tendon because I crippled myself. Yeah. The medical ramifications of going from 0 to 60, which is how I do everything, have been lasting ever since then. But the takeaway for me was my book Only Tens, which is, if it's a 10, you're going to do it, right? Like, how do you know it's a 10? You did it. Like, I focused on just a couple of things. And it was the revelation, when I started my own business and became an entrepreneur with ADD, like I felt like I couldn't get anything done. And the revelation was when I'm committed to something, the ADD doesn't even factor in. Like, when I wanted to run the Marine Corps Marathon, I run the Marine Corps Marathon. When there's a new iPhone, I have one. No matter how busy I am, I somehow find the time to get a new iPhone, right? So when I actually want to do something, I do it. And that to me was like, when I ran the marathon, when I made $1 million, when I did those things because I said I would, I was like, okay, the jig is up with the I can't, or I have ADD, or I have this. Now the ADD plagues me daily, but it's again because I'm not always clear on what it is I'm on fire to do. So my book Only Tens is I only actually do tens, right? I have a theory that people only do what they want to do and don't do what they don't want to do, only always, right? Like I don't feel like paying my bills, but I don't want the late charges. So I actually want to pay my bills,
Yeah.
right? That's why I pay my bills. So if I can boil that down with everything is we only do what we want to do and we don't do what we don't want to do.
Right on. Yeah, what you said there a second ago around, I have the whole notion of an and as opposed to a but, so it's like the whole idea of I have ADD and I can do these great things, as opposed to I have ADD but I'm trying to be an entrepreneur, or I'm trying to be an entrepreneur but I have ADD. Yeah, ADD. It's like they're both things that you have, right? I have it and I'm doing these great things, or I'm doing these great things and I have ADD, right? It's not a one but, because but tends to like minimize the other half of that sentence or give you some sort of an excuse or an out or explain away something, right? Whereas the
Yeah.
and just sort of empowers it.
Right. So the Rising Lady Heron book is it's kind of a complicated thing for me. It's a little more ambitious than anything I've done before. And writing the book was hard with ADD. So I have a book coach, right, who like keeps me on track. But then there's worksheets on my website, which, again, I'm brilliant at making worksheets. I'm brilliant at writing a book. I'm brilliant at talking about these things, but putting them all together turns my AD, like my brain turns to mush when that happens. And I just like all of a sudden have to make some kind of health food Instagram recipe instead of reconciling this. So I hired people to help me reconcile. Like I have a meeting this afternoon with someone who's going to be on Zoom. I'm going to show them where the worksheets are. My assistant put them all in a neat little place, right? And she's going to match them to the links in the book because I can't do it, right? I just short circuit. So when it's a 10, just because you're having trouble with it, getting help means that you are committed to it, right? So I got the help I need to make sure this is a thing.
I love that, man. I love that, recognizing kind of where your strengths and weaknesses are too, and not looking at it like a failure or like some sort of a cop out if you're not doing all those things, right? It's recognizing where you have strength and where you don't, and filling those gaps with the right tools, right? And then leveraging what is really a superpower that you could easily make an excuse for. Well, I have this thing ADD, I'm just going to take drugs to kind of hammer it down and numb it. And which I think a lot of times as parents, you hear these stories, right? And again, I'm no doctor, and I, do what you want to do with your kids. But my thought is, if the kid has ADD, there's maybe a way to leverage that for good, as opposed to just drug him or her and push that down.
If you have the resources,
yeah,
to help your child
sure.
who learns in a different way. If you don't have the resources, you're screwed, right?
Yeah.
You have public school and that's it, and you have to get them through, right? My son, when he took ADD medicine and when he didn't, night and day, right? But we had the resources to hire him a coach, right? To have him, to give him the help. So it's parents. I believe parents do whatever it is that they can do with whatever they have. I'm not big on indicting people for trying to get through.
Agreed, and certainly I have many friends that have used medicine for their kids with ADD, and they say the same thing. They're night and day, like they can't get anything done, and then with medicine they can. I have
a friend whose son is going through medical school because of Adderall. Right. Like without Adderall, he can't do it. He's brilliant, but he wants to be a doctor. So the Adderall, he can do his schoolwork, and he's going to be a brilliant doctor.
Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so let's talk about being a coach of executives and kind of how you've kind of migrated now. So you're not in sales anymore, or you're focusing on the writing and being a coach and leader.
Yeah, I made the choice, but I was kind of kicked out. Like when I was in these tech companies and I had my awakening, I would send out newsletters every day with all the cool stuff that I learned that everybody else should learn. And I'd get a call from the CEO, Silverman, this is really nice. Stop it. And then it was my ex-wife who actually pushed me to be a coach, and she was dependent. Like she stayed home with the kids until they were out of school, even though we were divorced. And I made, I gave all the resources for that. When we found coaching, it was an author, Alan Cohen, who called me and told me that Spirit told him I should be a coach. And I was like, what is a coach? I don't know what coach is. And what do you mean spirit's telling you, how do you don't even know me?
Mm.
Anyway, he was right. And I told my ex-wife about it. And she goes, oh my God. She says, I've been telling you for years that you need to teach people what you do. She says, we didn't know what it was. We thought it was HR. We didn't know, and we wouldn't pay a lot and whatever. This coaching thing is who you are and what you should do. And now she depended on me and she pushed me into coaching. So I wound up quitting my $500,000 a year job and going, no, I'm a coach. And I remember my boss going, so are you making as much money as a coach, air quotes, as you did as a sales guy? And now I make more money, but but it was tough for a few years. Right.
Yeah.
But I just couldn't, like, I had friends who died at 50, like millionaires, like they never got to see the fruits of their, I watched marriages just fall apart in servitude to being in the 1%.
Yeah.
And I don't believe you have to leave the corporate world. Like, the beginning of the Rising Leader handbook starts with an essay I wrote called Skydiving in the Office. You don't have to go skydiving. You don't have to go on a safari to feel alive, right? You can speak up. You can set a boundary. You can say your opinion, right? You can hold your values. That's living at the edge in the corporate world and has you come alive, right? I just couldn't stand watching people I cared about destroy themselves anymore. So I had to do something. So that's when I became a coach, just started preaching my preach.
Yeah. And so I coach as well. And a lot of my clients are kind of grappling with that whole notion of life purpose and mission and like, why am I here? And some of those things.
Oh, that's your story, right? Yeah. Your story is you were looking for fulfillment, and you know that fulfillment is when you're serving others, when you're pouring into others, right. That's when you come alive. So you found your way of doing that. And now, like, you coach people who are probably 5 minutes behind you. Right. You see yourself in them and you're like, okay. Or they see a future version of themselves in you and want that.
Right. And absolutely. And sounds like many of your clients are sort of grappling with that same thing. Like, I've made all this money, or I'm having all this success, but I'm empty, stressed out. No,
it used to be. So that's where the God, the universe, whatever, you think I think my purpose is being Oprah, and I think my purpose is teaching people to find their heart and learn how to, find their purpose and leave corporate life. No, my purpose is I teach leaders how to lead with authenticity. I teach them how to lead open-hearted. I teach them how to thrive in those environments. I teach them how to become trusted advisors. I teach them how to be great husbands and wives and fathers and all that. But, I teach people who are most of my clients are staying in corporate and want to thrive. They're making tons of money. They can make so much of an impact. Like, they start foundations, like they start projects in their organization. So I'm making so much more of an impact with people who are staying in the rat race and thriving than finding people who are trying to leave and follow their passion. Never would have thought that in a million years.
Interesting. But do you find that even though they're staying, are they tapping into some higher piece around purpose or mission or calling?
100% within the confines of what they do, right? But again, for me, the first thing I do is I teach them who they are, right? Like, I joke with people, people say, what do you do for a living? And my little sly answer is I actually introduce people to God. I just don't advertise that, right? And I don't have a specific about that, but I introduce them to who they really are. I introduce them to the fallacy of what their life was about. When I unhook that, then they see their families as a priority over the stated value is family. But if you look at the calendar and you look at the tension and you look at the energy, it's in making sure the career is going because the belief is that's what's serving my family. Right. And so, kind of confronting those lies are really important. What happens is when I get them to care less about their job, they get looser. kind of like a baseball player,
Yeah.
right? A dumb baseball player is a better baseball player because they forget the last at bat. Nothing's important. They're just playing a game, right? When I get them to see that, all of a sudden they become more successful at work,
Yeah.
right? Their leadership style starts to thrive. Their ability to be a trusted advisor thrives because they're not afraid to speak their mind, and they do it in a fashion that can be heard. And then, like, again, my favorite story is I coach a couple of guys on a leadership team in another country, and I went to go visit them on site, and their wives and them took me out to dinner. And the wives said to me, we know what you do for our husbands at work. It's just night and day what you've done for the company and all that stuff. But let us tell you what you've done for them as men and as husbands. Dude, 5-star restaurant, bawling my eyes out. Like please stop. I cannot handle. This is what I live for. Right.
Yeah.
And they're crushing it.
Yeah.
Both. Right.
Yeah. What would you say, if there is one, a through line that is like what you're peeling your client's eyes back to see?
Fear, how fear drives everything, right? The not enoughness, the fear, the should of it all, that we take as reality versus what might really be going on. And so I unhook them from all that stuff in the monkey mind. Because they're, again, almost everybody I've ever met is as earnest as they could possibly be. They believe in what they're doing, even if it's dastardly, even if it's misguided. They believe in it, that's the best road they can choose until they find another road. So like this commitment to the rat race and driving yourself into the ground, there's a virtue under that, but there's a fear driving it.
And it's it's a fear of loss, fear of less, fear of scarcity. I mean, is it
not being enough, all that stuff.
Yeah. And that's
greed. Greed is just fear.
Yeah.
Right. Greed isn't nasty. It's just fear.
Right on. Do you find it commonly that that fear has come from things way in the past, or is it all over the board? Always. Oh. Yeah.
Dude, the more I do this work, the more the more I know everything comes from when you were 3, 4, 5 up to 7 years old. The Jesuits say, give me a boy till the age of 7 and I'll show you the man. Yeah. Right. Like, I know I'm run by, childhood stuff. And I'm getting certified in Enneagram, which is a personality test that, talks about core motivations, and it's all formed in what worked for you when you were 4 years old. Yeah. Right. And then you bring that into your adult life. And when I show people that when they're in the boardroom and they're only in the boardroom with a bunch of 5-year-olds who shave and wear makeup and get dressed, and that's all that's happening, all of a sudden the weight of it and the seriousness drops, and that you see you're just dealing with people's stuff in the boardroom. And now if you can get grounded and centered and kind, you have the power in the room.
Yeah. I love it. I love the idea too of being loose, right? That analogy you made around the baseball player and being loose, because that's someone that's really playing without fear. When I hear looseness, ball players that play tight are afraid, right? They're afraid of losing. They're afraid of striking out. They're afraid of, and that tightness actually fulfills the destiny of the loss, as opposed to if you can be loose and forgetful and in the moment, that's more that place of flow, right? And I love that. And thinking about that in terms of a business mindset is the same, right? If we're playing and being honest and working with integrity and not afraid of outcomes, and we're just controlling our actions, now we're able to maximize our capability, right? What we're able to do and beyond.
And it's more fun.
Yeah.
Right. And and sustainable. Right. It's actually you can actually do this for a period of time.
Exactly. And not grind yourself into the ground. I love it, man. Is there any kind of key things that you recommend clients do in terms of either, movement, journaling, anything that you're like, this is a staple?
Yeah. I wish I wasn't so cliche, right? A quiet time. Right. So you've got to have quiet time. You got to have contemplation. If you don't get in touch with yourself, you stand absolutely no chance. So the first thing I do, I coach a lot of people, New York finance people and that kind of stuff, because your legs are always bouncing. And I'm like, let's try the 1 minute meditation. Like, let's just sit at your kitchen table with your coffee or tea. Put your phone down, put it away, stare out the window, and breathe. 1 minute, just 1 minute. I've started more meditation practices with that 1 minute meditation of just stare out the window for a minute and breathe, right? And then go for a walk without your phone. Then I teach journaling. Again, the people who stick with it, life-changing, right? Again, so many people like, I've been journaling, I've been doing morning pages for 3 weeks. It's life-changing. Then you talk to them a couple months later, they're like, yeah, no, I really should get back to that. That was really good. Right. So for me, I try and keep all those practices front and center so that I'm talking from experience. But contemplation, journaling, right, and then exercise. Most of the people I work with are like ADHD 5-year-olds that we're trying to put in a classroom and tell to sit at a desk. Like, if you don't go throw around with some weights, if you don't go move your body, there is no way you can be grounded and centered when you're in a stressful situation at work, right? So those are the staples. And then the other piece is you have to have date night. You absolutely have to have date night. If you're in a relationship, you absolutely have to connect with your partner, right? And I joke that I'm the ghost of Christmas future, right? Like, if I am 62, the joke with a lot of my clients who are in their 30s or early 40s, I'm like, if I'm in better shape than you, this isn't working. Yeah. There's just no reason for you to be 35 years old and I am in better shape than you. I have a new, like, everything hurts and I'm in better shape than you. Yeah. Really? And the other is, I'm the ghost of Christmas future. I know your wife or your husband is everything to you. They won't be in 10 years if you don't feed this thing. Right. So I'm a big advocate of spending time on those things. They're all cliche, and they're all essential. You just can't do it without slowing down.
Yeah. Yeah. Cliches aren't necessarily bad, right? They typically mean they came up because there was truth in them, right? Now they become, I've heard it a lot. So it's a cliche, but it's true. The
truth is, if you don't slow down, life will slow you down, right? It will blow up your health. It will tell you, go to bed. Right? Instead of sitting for a minute or sitting for 5 minutes in a meditation, it'll be like, you're in bed now. Especially with women with adrenal fatigue. I just met so many women who have just been balls to the wall and then in bed for a year, because once they hit that wall, there is no spying that back. Right? It is building back a new human, and every woman who's gone through adrenal fatigue will tell you, that is no joke. That is a spiritual awakening all in and of itself.
Right on. All right, man, this has been great, dude. I want to be respectful of your time. What's next for you? What's on the plate? What are you excited about?
The Rising Leader Handbook comes out March 5th. And the reviews are coming back, and the reviews are making me cry. I was terrified to put this book out because there's so many good leadership books in the world, and like, why am I throwing my hat in the ring? And I come from a very different perspective. I come from a very much a relationship, humanistic, spiritual bent, and the reviews that I'm getting back just make me cry that this is actually a worthwhile, good book, and that my experiences and my training, everything, have brought something unique. So, my podcast and the Rising Leader program, which is a 12-week course for companies, that's what this year is about.
Awesome, man. Where can people find you and connect with your work?
So they can go to markjsilverman.com, mark_Silverman.com. They can see my Rising Leader podcast there. They can get a free copy of Only Tens, my other book that I wrote. They can get a free copy there. They can get a free summary of the Rising Leader Handbook there. They can get free videos of, most of my clients have ADD also. They won't read my books. So they asked me to make little 5-minute videos on all the exercises in the book. So that's there for free for everybody also.
Okay. And it was markjsilverman.com.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Mark, it's been a pleasure, man. Appreciate you sharing so much, so openly and so honestly. I know our listeners are going to love the show. So thank you so much for taking time to do it.
Thanks for having these conversations. They're important.
Pleasure. To our audience, thank you for taking time to listen to the show. Always humbled that you do that. If you would share the program with a friend, write a review, give us a rating, all those good things help us reach a broader audience. Until next time, friends, I'm Eric Sardina. You've been listening to the Return to Authenticity podcast, and bye for now.